recording, by the way.
Henry David Thoreau was one of the most influential writers of his time, and one of his essays, Civil Disobedience, still today encourages the need to prioritize one's conscience over the dictates of law. So today, my partner and I, Jessica Dubridge, will be interviewing students, teachers, and other members of our community to see if they think Thoreau's ideas still apply to our politics and government today. So join us on our journey through civil disobedience. Alrighty, so here we have young Jacob Adams. People call him Herman for some reason, don't know why.
No one does.
I prefer Jacob. So this quote here by Henry David Thoreau, that government is best which governs not at all, and when men are prepared for it, that will be the kind of government they will have. What does that quote really mean to you?
To me, it means that the government shouldn't have so much say in everything. I believe that as people, we need to band together and decide what's right.
What does that quote mean to you, Kelly?
Well, that quote is very deep, and I would assume, to me, what it sounds like is that we don't need a government that tells us what to do, that we should all know what we should do and all work together to make that kind of government work for all.
You want to go for the people, by the people in a way.
Yes, I do. Absolutely.
That's very insightful. What did Thoreau think, Jake?
Well, Thoreau thought earlier in his essay that the government pretty much serves no purpose, and it basically, they aren't doing anything at all. We're going to do that one over.
Colton, do you agree with Thoreau's belief that there should be no central government?
I personally believe that Thoreau was on the right track of keeping people's, let them make their own decisions and follow their own rules, as long as it doesn't affect people negatively.
So, Thoreau begins his essay by arguing that the government rarely improves itself, and a majority of the power goes to the majority because it's the strongest group, not because they hold the most legitimate viewpoint. Do you agree or disagree with this?
Well, you know, Miss Bridge. Politics. Here's the thing. The lower class. Here's the thing. The lower class does not get much of a say in the government because the upper class runs the government. Now, the people in office in our government get paid a chunk of money, right? A lump sum, making them upper class. The lower class people are not involved in the government, meaning they have less power and less say and less representation.
So here we have Miss Barito, head of the school, is going to give her ideas on a few of Thoreau's ideas. This quote, that government is best which governs not at all, and when men are prepared for it, that will be the kind of government they will have. How does this quote touch you in a way?
Okay, so I believe a lot in the democratic society and the policies by which we govern by, and I do think that the government representatives need to represent what the majority of the people think, need, and want. However, sometimes I see that there are some things that have been created that have stopped us from really being able to move forward on what we maybe as a majority would want. So let me give you an example right now is what's going on within the city of Scotts Valley and within our school district, where we have a need and a desire to pass a parcel tax. Well, to pass these kinds of taxes requires a 66 2/3 majority vote. That means that the people who might have a negative vote have more power and can stop something than those who might actually truly want it and represent the majority. So if you're talking about 51% being a majority, but you need 66 2/3 votes to get it, that means the naysayers have more power than those who want something to happen. And that's really frustrating when you're trying to rule through a democratic process and trying to rule by majority, and there's clearly a need and everybody wants to get something passed, but again, the naysayers have more power. So I had a real problem with that, and it's something that we keep talking about and looking at, and then yet nothing ever quite changes.
So Jake, what is some of your insight on Thoreau's civil disobedience?
Well, a quote from his essay right here is, if 1,000 men were not to pay their tax bills this year, that would be a violent and bloody measure, as it would be to pay them and enable the state to commit violence and shed innocent blood. Basically, this quote is saying that the government is taking our tax money and using it for war and violence. And if we were to stop paying the money that funds this war and violence, they would have to find means elsewhere to find the money. So there would, no matter what, violence will.
Are we going?
We're going.
Okay, so quote by Henry David Thoreau is, "Law never made men a whit more just, and by the means of their respect for it, even the well-disposed are daily made agents of injustice." So basically what Thoreau meant by that is that people's first obligation should be what they believe is right, but a person is not obligated to devote his life to eliminating the evils, but is obligated to not participate in them. So, like, since you've been talking a lot about Occupy Wall Street movement and classes and stuff, how do you think this quote relates?
I think Thoreau is calling on people to be responsible for the world and community they're a part of. And so if they see an injustice, they do have somewhat of a duty to react, although their duty is not to just seek to take all injustice out of the world, but certainly the injustices they see. And I think in part it comes from John Locke, who said that our role in a democracy is to make sure that democracy represents the people. So if our democracy is not representing us, then it is our job, as Thoreau would agree, to do what we think is right.
That relates to our government.
I think it passively relates to our government, but not in the sense that individuals have the same role in society that they did in that time period. Because in that time period, population was smaller, therefore the effect of an individual on a large mass had a bigger impact than it does today.
Wow, that's very insightful.
It's the beard.
Yes, it is. Do you think that, like, the protesting that he's suggesting, like, to not participate in the government is effective? Would that be an effective way to do things now?
I find that when disagreeing with the government, you don't get anywhere and all you do is make enemies.
So do you think that people in our government are unjust?
There has been much corruption in our government. Reagan, Nixon, Andrew Johnson, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I personally believe that Jesse and I should rule.
The government does abuse their power?
Well, in that particular instance, I wouldn't say the government's abusing their power. It's because this is a process already been put in. But I think there are definitely times when it does happen. I also think there's many, many times when those who are elected into a position don't necessarily represent their constituents. And so they're up there making, voting on certain decisions to be made, and they're representing perhaps a small little group or themselves, how they personally feel, because all too often people get themselves elected because of a certain viewpoint they have, and it doesn't necessarily represent the constituents from where they come from.
I also think that it's probably not very possible that we would have a government that does not. I also think that is very unrealistic of Thoreau to think that we couldn't have a government, because it's not gonna, like he says in his writings, that it should just be like that people, if everyone acted a certain way, we wouldn't need a government. But I don't think people are going to stop being greedy. So there needs to be some kind of rule that makes it. So.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Because personally, Thoreau to me sounded like pardon my French, a butthole. Because he always talked about how the government shouldn't control and how he was so smart. But really, no.
Well, there you have it.